Welcome to Qedit part 15. Today we're going to talk about how to use PaletteX and all the opcodes associated with it. We're going to talk about get players in range, and we're also going to talk about get random. So Phoenix Mog is going to start you off by talking about PaletteX.
PaletteX should be familiar for players who have played through Phantasmal World 3. It was used as the system for the amulet. It was a way to trigger the invincibility whenever you want by pushing the X button, hence the name of the opcode. What it basically is in other games, it is also known as a special action key or a way to call the script whenever with the player's input. Kayak can talk to this computer here and he'll enable PaletteX, and you'll notice on his palette that the X button will have a symbol on it. This signifies that you have the activate PaletteX and enable PaletteX opcode in the script here active. Set PaletteX callback, that's the function that's going to be called when he pushes the X button. So if we scroll up to function 555, all this function is doing is just showing us the number of players and players in range. Kayaks will talk about these opcodes when he gets to them, but to showcase PaletteX, it's literally just push the X button. When he pushes his button, he'll get a pop-up for his window that'll provide us the opcode results. So he was able to just pull this up whenever he pushed the X button. The differences between number of players he will talk about, but the main function from PaletteX is that you can just call this as you wish as a player. Phantasmal World 3 is the only case of Sega using this, so it hasn't really been used well, but there is plenty of different uses of this opcode that you can integrate into your quests.
So just to review on how PaletteX is done in script form, to set it to the player's palette, you need to use activate and enable, and then callback is the one that is the function that you're going to call. If you want to just disable it, you need to do the stuff in function 565 as disable PaletteX and then restore PaletteX. So if I hit disable, it returns my palette back to normal. To cover what function 555 is doing, we can go up to here. So there's two get player numbers in here. At the end of the day, they do the same thing. I just had them in here because I was testing to see what was different, and I learned that in reality they're pretty much the same thing. If I hit X here again, I pull this up. So the way players in range works is you have two registers in the beginning here. So R1 is the player slot in this case, R250, which is get slot number in my function 0. R2, or the second register in the sequential here, is the range that is decided. So if you make this like a huge number, like 300, he'd be in range for me if I was across the room, let's say. But the range is 30, so 30 is pretty short. And register 3, in this case, is just the output register. So if we were to open this window message, you'd see that number in range is register 3. And this is a pretty useful opcode. You can do a lot with it. Sega did use this a few times, notably in Towards the Future, where they had a instance where you had to stay close to another player in order to do a side quest. Not a great use of it, but being that this is a version 2 opcode, it is one of the very few ways in that specific version that you can actually see if all the players are gathered in one spot, because they don't have stuff like get floor number and floor player detect, which are both very useful. So yeah, so let's say if I were to do this again, but I'm a little further than him, like if I'm over here, I'll get player in range number 0. So he's too far away for me to be in range. So yeah, there's a bunch of things you can do with this opcode. Is there anything that you want to talk about with it?
All I can really say is that it's really up to the the user to decide what to do with it because it is very functional. This is the only opcode of this type.
All right. And the last thing that we're going to cover is I have another console over here. It calls function 552, which does get random. So Sega used this basically to determine all of their random and all of their quests. A good example would be Beach Laughter.
Beach Laughter.
Yeah, so in Beach Laughter, Sega uses this for the high-low game where you roll a number between 1 and 100. This is essentially the exact same function that they use. Basically, the way get random works, in your first register here, it's the low bound. Then register 27, which is hidden here, it's the sequential job here. Register 27 would be the high bound. In my case, register 26 is 1, and register 27 is 65,535. Sega did this because, in all reality, the get random function is not great. If you were to do this by itself without any of these other calculations that are happening here, it ends up being a very weighted number to either the upper or lower limit. So Sega went an extra step and included get time. Get time, the short of it is it gets the number of frames in time. So it ends up being like a large, like 12 or 14 digit number, and then it uses that to do all of its random. At the end, we're saying we're rolling a number between 1 and 100 because we're doing a Modi 100 at the end. So
it's basically long division by 100.
Yeah, exactly. So 1 and 100, 44. At the end of all this, I clear all the registers so that this is rolling properly again. And if you just spam this, you'll get different numbers: 22, 35, 86, 29, 28. So this is how Sega did their random. On Should Serve itself, we actually have a server random that is way less code than this, and it also could sync across all the clients in the game. So it ends up being really useful. If you wanted to, let's say, sync this, your result, R28, you would need a sync register R28 to R28. And you couldn't even actually do this in Dreamcast because they don't have sync register. They only have sync ready. But this would be a way to sync register this to all the other clients. You'd have the leader roll this, or one player would roll this, and then they'd sync it to everyone else so that everyone would be under the same numbers, essentially. Because this will roll per client if you have each client go through it. If you want to go over get random more in detail, you can go to the page on the wiki, and it pretty much has the same formula here that they have in my quest. I would recommend doing all of this get time stuff because it's going to give you a better result instead of it being weighted. Thank you for watching part number 15. In another episode in the future, we may go over how to tie a particle to a object just like this one. We'll also go over how to do symbol chat objects as well. I don't know if we've covered that yet. Anyway, take care. Have a nice day.